Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a problem I have with the YL1 oil pump. A few days ago, I started filling the fluids on the YL1, including the oil tank, the oil injection tank. And after a day or so, I noticed that there was oil accumulating, two-stroke oil accumulating underneath here in this cavity where I'm pointing to. And so I cleaned it out really well with contact cleaner so I didn't affect the paint on the cover, and it came back. So after about 8 hours or so, I'd start to notice this accumulation of oil in here. So my first thought was one of these banjo fittings was leaking, which is not uncommon, by the way. In fact, it's almost anticipated. So I checked both of these banjo fittings, and this one the one on the outside appeared to be fine. I was suspecting one way inside here that you probably can't really see. So I took that fitting apart. I clamped off the oil feed line, I took the fitting apart, cleaned up the crush washers, these little copper washers, put it back together, snugged it up as tight as I dared, and it continues to leak. I did that twice to this rear banjo fitting here. So then I thought, well, there's a little bit of a mystery. So what you see in here right now, this powder, that's nothing but baking flour that I got from the house. So I took some baking flour and, I put it in a little tub like this with a brush. See if I can get that in focus for you. And I cleaned it all really good again, dried it out with compressed air. Then I liberally used the brush, the paintbrush, and put that flour in here to try to get a sense of where it was leaking or is leaking. And even though you may not be able to see it very well from this perspective, I don't think it's that inside banjo fitting. Let me see if I can move the camera a little bit and give you a little bit different perspective here. I don't think it's this inside banjo fitting right there, because the powder around it, or the flour, is dry. Completely dry, as far as I can tell. However, up underneath here, right above this screw that I'm pointing to right now, and again, you probably can't see it, there is an accumulation. You can see the flour has been absorbing the green two-stroke oil. So the leak is coming from up underneath here somewhere. I don't think it's from the banjo. I think it's from something else, which is a little confusing to me because there's a gasket on the back side of this pump where the pump drive fits into the drive pinion on the inside of the engine. Now, it's possible when I put this together that I didn't get that gasket in there just right. If that gasket is leaking two-stroke oil, that would imply that the seal on the inside is bad as well. But how the oil is getting to the outside here and accumulating, if it's not one of these banjos, and it's not this feed tube either, I know that, is a mystery. So I suspect it's either a damaged oil feed line, one of these plastic lines, which I don't think would be this one on the inside, which I don't think is the case. Otherwise I'd see oil on top of the pump here, and I don't. Or there's something going on with that gasket back there and or the seal or back there that I can't see naturally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the pump. I'm going to have to pinch off this oil line, remove the two banjos, and then pull these two screws, one here and one here, pull the pump off, see what's going on the backside, on the backside, and try to determine at that point where the leak's coming from. It's not a bad leak, it's very subtle, but it does start to accumulate just a little bit down here after about 6 or 8 hours, and after 24 hours it'll start to work its way down to the edge here. Let me give you a little bit better perspective. It'll start to work its way down forward here to the edge. So it's enough to be irritating, not enough to probably be serious, but since I haven't started the bike yet, I'm working towards that. Now's the time to pull this apart. I've already bled this pump once, now I'm going to have to bleed it again, of course, once I break these fittings open and figure out what's going on the back side of the pump. Now these pumps are actually rebuildable. You can buy a kit. I think it's around $35 US for all the seals and the gaskets and all that. If you want to get inside of here, which is not something I would prefer to do, but it is doable if I have to go that route. But first thing I'm going to do is pull this off, and then I'm going to get it up on the bench. I'm not going to show pulling it off because the quarters are too tight for me to video. Next time you see this pump, it'll be up on the bench. Well, it's about 15 or so minutes later. You can see the oil pump here. I haven't done much cleaning with it. You can see the flour and oil. Some of this, of course, was just overflow from me removing the pump. But right there, you can see some remnants of the flour. Here's a gasket. This is a gasket that fits right here. And then the banjo bolts and the check balls. Frankly, I don't really see much wrong with it. That's obvious. The only two places this pump could leak, the way I believe it was, is either where this gasket fits here and this fits up against the block like that, or around this top banjo fitting right here. This is the top of the pump. I don't believe the front banjo fitting was leaking at all. In fact, I know it wasn't. I know that one was tight. Wouldn't you know it, it would possibly be the inside. So for some reason, what I suspect is around this gasket. And I don't know why that might be, because this was a brand new Yamaha gasket OEM that I put in here. There's nothing wrong with it. It looks to be perfectly fine. I might have a second one of these. I might have a spare, so I'll have to check. It's possible, I suppose, that this surface right here, this machine surface, isn't flat. I can put it on my surface plate and find out. But what I think I'm going to do is clean this all up. You can get all the oil and the flour off of it. And I'm going to see if, take a better look at the oil line, this top oil feed line. It comes out here and goes up into the cylinder. Take a closer look at that. It might have a crack in it. It didn't look like it, but it could be. And if I can't find anything wrong with this after putting this on the surface plate and seeing if this is warped, which it probably isn't, very likely I will clean this up really well. See if I've got a new gasket, even though there's really nothing wrong with this one that I can see. The screws are tight, everything was nice and snug. And see if I might end up just putting it back together and focusing on this top fitting here and the oil line itself. Because I don't really see anything else wrong with this. I never had this pump apart. It is pumping. I can tell when I turn the disc here that it is pumping, so the pump is working. And it's not leaking here around the spool. It's not leaking here. It's leaking on this back side here somewhere. And again, I don't know. It's either this or it's this, that banjo fitting is my, once you know it wouldn't be the front banjo. It has to be the back one that's hard to get at. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit, keep an eye on that oil line that still has oil in it and see what that might look like, and I'll keep you appraised. Well, I spent the last half an hour, 45 minutes going over everything, cleaning it. I don't believe this surface where the pump body mates to the engine is leaking. In other words, I don't think this gasket here is leaking. I think it's coming from above that, which leads me back to where I started, which is this banjo fitting right here, or the plastic oil line itself. This machine surface right here where the banjo bolt fits down against wasn't near as smooth as this one was. This one did not leak. I know this one didn't leak. So I took a real fine needle file and cleaned that up just a bit, and I'll dress the copper washers as well. Make sure they're flat on my surface plate when I put it back together. So I'm believing either this banjo fitting is leaking here or the plastic line itself. So what I'm going to do is finish cleaning up the bike end. I did visually inspect the plastic line as best I could. It's kind of tough in there to really see, but I need to clean that all up because there's oil all over the place in there. I'm going to remount the pump. I'm going to retorque this. I think it takes 5 foot-pounds, 60 inch-pounds of torque on these little screws. So I think I'm going to go ahead and button everything back up on the bike and bleed it, get the air out of the bleed screw right here. And if it continues to leak then I'll probably replace or swap around these copper washers here first. Make sure that fitting is good and tight. If it's still leaking after that, depending on how bad it's leaking, that would lead me to probably replace the plastic oil lines that go up to the cylinder. Or cylinders. I'd probably replace them as a set. So I really don't want to have to do that. So I'm going to put it back together and see if I can get this fitting to potentially stop it. It's now early the next morning. It's probably been 18, 19 hours since I completed reinstalling the oil pump assembly. And as you can see there, this has not been touched. I literally just took a look at it and turned the light and the camera on. It's completely dry, so there is no weeping or seeping of oil. The conclusion I've come to is this top banjo bolt back in here for the one oil pipe, not this one, but the one back up in there, just wasn't sealed properly. Because that's really the only thing I did any work to. If you recall, I mentioned yesterday I just cleaned that mounting surface up a little bit with a needle file, took the crush washers and ran them over a piece of 600 grit paper on my surface plate to make sure they're good and flat, and then put everything back together. So, and I did prime it, by the way. I loosened this little screw right here I'm pointing to, and spun the priming wheel right here a couple of times until air bubbles stopped coming out, and I could see oil start to flow through both of the oil lines. And then I hosed it all down really good with contact cleaner to degrease it, de-oil it, and then I left it, as you can see here. So I'm going to consider this a success. The moral of the story is, and I think I mentioned this before, these banjo fittings can be a little bit fussy. It's not unusual. In fact, I usually anticipate banjo fittings are going to leak when I first install them. I'm always cautious about not over-tightening these screws because these banjo bolts, because they go into aluminum, which is soft, and if you get too heavy-handed with it and you strip that pump body out, you have a problem. So I'm always caution on the conservative side when I tighten those up, and tighten as necessary. But I think I have that problem solved. I think the oil leak, obviously the oil leak is gone, and we can move on. I do want to correct one thing I had talked about yesterday, I think, and that is the attaching screws up underneath here for the pump body, where it attaches the pump body to the engine case. Those are 5mm screws, not 6, and the torque on those is not 60 inch-pounds. It's about 24 inch-pounds. It's considerably less, and I don't want anybody to be confused by that. Excuse me. So since I do use NACs on my screws, such as those, I reduced the torque on those attaching screws to 20 inch-pounds, and so both of them were snugged up to 20 inch-pounds, which seemed to work because nothing's leaking. That's going to be it for this video today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.